Before we start using the product, it's helpful to understand what kinds of work is Parabola best suited to support so that you can start mapping these lessons to the processes you run every day. To make the mental model even clearer, we'll also talk about how Parabola complements and extends core systems in your tech stack, such as your ERP and databases. The goal coming out of this lesson is for you to feel like you can confidently recognize strong Parabola use cases in your own work. And to get started, we'll break down the core characteristics of great Parabola use cases. The best Parabola use cases usually share very similar DNA. They require pulling data from more than one system and require you to break into spreadsheets to clean, combine, and reconcile that data. You usually need to follow some kind of process document or an SOP, and usually we're working on processes that repeat, whether that is once per week or maybe every time you receive an email. And finally, these processes usually impact something that truly matters, whether that is time, accuracy, cost, revenue, or just giving you better visibility into your data. Now, a process doesn't need to check all 5 of these boxes to make for a great Parabola use case, but the more boxes a process checks, the better the use case is for Parabola. Because Parabola can automate anything you're currently doing in spreadsheets, there's really no limit to how many different use cases you can automate in Parabola. That said, from working with hundreds of other e-commerce operations and supply chain teams, we typically see key use cases fall into one of 4 buckets: data ingestion and structuring, reconciliation and auditing, monitoring and alerting, and cost performance and analysis. Let's break down each one and talk about some specific examples. Data ingestion and structuring is all about taking messy data and making it usable for downstream processes. We often see ops teams working with gross PDFs and unstandardized data, and there's a lot of massaging that goes into making that data usable. Think digitizing invoices and extracting the line items, or maybe mapping vendor information to your own internal format. The second category is reconciliation and auditing, where we're taking 2 or more data sets and comparing them against each other to identify any duplicates, missing values, or discrepancies. Some common examples include inventory and order reconciliations, as well as invoice audits across 3PLs and carriers. Often related to reconciliations are monitoring and alerting workflows that are built to notify you over channels that you live in every day, like Slack and email, as soon as human action is required. We see teams commonly deploy these types of use cases to track things like low inventory levels, as well as dwelling or missing orders between your ERP and different fulfillment channels. Finally, we have use cases related to cost and performance analysis. Think of these as your common reporting use cases, where maybe you're building dashboards in your ERP, but you're missing data from other sources, and so you're breaking into spreadsheets to create visualizations and provide the business with visibility. We often see these flows when we're analyzing landed cost or maybe creating scorecards for carriers and vendors. Those are the most common categories of use cases in a nutshell. And while it's really useful to understand the specific use case categories, it's also helpful to understand how Parabola interacts in the broader context of the tools that you already rely on every single day, like your ERP and sales channels. While Parabola flows often turn into your operational source of truth for how a process actually works, your source of truth remains your ERP, and systems like your WMS and sales channels continue to be integrated based on connections that your tech team builds, owns, and maintains. None of that changes with Parabola, but what does change is everything that happens between systems and outside of systems. Instead of continuing to export CSVs and work manually, now you have Parabola flows set up that are live integrated with your systems and automate things like reconciliations, allow you to extend reporting functionality with custom dashboards and visualizations, and also notify you when discrepancies exist across these systems. Additionally, if we think about messier data sources, such as your email, which is traditionally really hard to perfectly integrate with your ERP, especially if you're getting PDFs with a bunch of line items, now, instead of tech teams needing to figure out this work, ops can deploy workflows to extract key information with AI, structure it for your ERP and downstream systems, and automate those end-to-end processes. To make it even simpler, you can think about Parabola as the layer that prepares data for downstream systems and processes. It combines data across sources. It applies logic that maybe doesn't come out of the box in some of your existing tools. And it monitors all the systems that you don't have time to check all day, every day. Now that you understand the core characteristics of a good use case and you've seen some examples, let's take a moment to reflect on your own world. Think about the processes that you run where you're constantly exporting CSV files, performing VLOOKUPs, cleaning data, looking for discrepancies, and building reports. The goal isn't to build your whole list of use cases right now, but rather to think about those processes that feel really in line with the best Parabola use cases, which is ultimately going to make this whole course feel that much more relevant. That's all for this lesson, so we'll end with a quick recap. Now you know that the best use cases for Parabola usually tackle repetitive spreadsheet-heavy work that often involve two or more data sources. This work can range from data prep work to audit to analysis, and ultimately, it's not replacing your systems, but rather complementing and extending your systems so that you have to do less manual, repetitive work. With this foundation in place, we are ready to jump into the product. And in the next lesson, we'll walk through the flow building framework and introduce the building challenge that we'll work on for the duration of this course.